Welcome to the Business of Platforms, a video podcast series where Vivaldi will be chatting with the world's leading marketers, thinkers, and innovators about the evolution of business and the exciting ways in which platforms are helping companies and brands deliver greater value. Hello and welcome to the Business of Platforms podcast. I'm Agathe Blanchon-Ehrsam, partner and CMO of Vivaldi, and I'm delighted today to welcome Simone Cicero to the podcast.
Hello, everyone.
Simone's an entrepreneur, an innovator, an educator, a thought leader, and I'm really thrilled to have you here. We met a year or so ago, and you're a fantastic guest for us to have on the podcast because you're the creator of the Platform Design Toolkit, an open source tool that you offer for innovation and change to companies around the world. And I'm really excited to have you be able to share that with our audience today.
Yeah, of course, it's totally my pleasure.
Excellent. I mean, to start, I think it probably makes sense for you to share a little bit about what is the Platform Design Toolkit.
Yes, so basically we are talking about, I would say, knowledge framework and a set of tools that are heavily based on the tradition of design thinking in general, and more specifically service design. I would say also on the tradition of lean thinking and lean startup. So more or less, we try to put together a set of tools and approaches for designers that want to design what we call platform strategies, and that want to do that by means of co-design. So essentially having teams or engaging with their stakeholders. So basically, this is more or less what the toolkit is.
And so how did it get started?
Well, I mean, I am personally into, I would say, platform business since a while now, because at the start of my career, I suddenly started to work on and with open source software. That was the first steps. And after that, I think I had a large experience, long experience working in telco, which was interestingly enough, probably the first global industry, relevant industry that was completely transformed by platform business models. So I think that was the origin of everything, and I also had the chance to work a little bit on open source hardware later on. So all this work with open business models, ecosystem-driven business models, sharpen my interest towards understanding how these models worked, and from there, I kind of felt like it was interesting and useful to codify these into something that people could actually use and build upon it.
And your background in kind of open source software design definitely translates to then the kind of very strong usability and the experience that you've created and the way you've packaged the tools themselves.
Well, yeah, the tools are designed to be used with very much ease. So the idea is to, I always say that we want to demystify systems thinking somehow. And also, we have this long tradition in systems design, system thinking, but my experience as a self-taught designer, it was that this world of complex systems was really, out of reach for most of the innovators and people that wanted to engage with this new frontier, I would say. So my idea from the very start, it was to start to make something easy and simple that people could use, first of all, to design business models, That was at the very start, I would say, when we forked the business model canvas, and then increasingly to understand, the complexity of incentives and potential that is, related with ecosystems, and then, find their own way, to start imagining how these ecosystems could be mobilized step by step in a simple process, essentially focused to experiment. So that was very much the idea of the evolution of the original canvas into more complex and more complete, I would say, toolkit.
And it was a huge step to codify all of that. I imagine it must have been a lot of work to create that first toolkit. The problem with codification is that when the world changes as quickly as ours does, there's a risk of then needing to evolve all of that pretty quickly. How much have things changed in the past 6 years?
Well, that's a good point. First of all, I think the less we codify, the better it is, because sometimes we fall, we tend to fall in love with our own tools. So I think this is definitely not the point of creating a toolkit. I don't want to, I'm more interested in the topic than in my on our set of tools. So first of all, this is one point. Another point is, things evolve very fast. But if you think about one of the most used frameworks for business design, which is essentially the very simple business model canvas by Osterwalder and Pigneur, I think this tool actually barely evolved in the last 10 years or something like that. And I think this is one of the strengths of the tool, because I think at some point you also need to lay down some kind of shared language more than shared tools. And even if sometimes we felt that we had to change something, or maybe one definition didn't really fit with the evolving understanding that we had about the topic, I think we really wanted to keep things, I don't want to say slow, but I would say at least to lay down some framework that wasn't changing every week, because otherwise people couldn't even talk about this using the same language. So I think that's one big point. Sometimes we feel this pressure to evolve, add more things, and we really need to resist this, because the toolkit is not the point of the discussion. It's really about, it's really just a shared language that we use to have a conversation on how things are changing.
So at the core of the toolkit is really the idea of the relationship that needs to be created within an ecosystem, and something that you talk about quite a bit. Can you kind of share a little bit about how that insight came to you, and how that was framed, and how that's then kind of had a impact on the design of the toolkit, or even kind of your experiences working with clients?
Well, in general, I think this was very much the basic intuition behind the toolkits, because we started this work because we felt that the business model canvas was a beautiful tool, but a little bit limited, because it was so customer centered, so tied with this idea of the consumer, the brand and the consumer. So everybody, when I started, and then the team working on this in 2013, it was the age of a rampant sharing economy conversation. So everybody was talking about this new trend, and then we suddenly had the gig economy. Everything was about multi-sided business models. And I think now we understand why, after 5, 6, 7 years, now we understand why we were talking about this emergence of peer-to-peer models, because essentially when you have rising potential growing in small entities like individuals or small companies, it's kind of normal that you start considering them as something visible, something important. You don't rely anymore to producers in the same way that it was in the industrial age. So basically, hiding them behind the curtain of the company, so the brand. So then, when you have these producers and consumers interacting, in general, and we also talk about producers and consumers more as roles more than actual, I would say, fixed identities. So when you start talking about producer and consumer and more about the actual interaction between them, then you start to realize that the tools that we used to have in the last 20 or something like that years, they don't fit anymore in the new situation, because everything that we used to adopt to design services in the industrial age was so customer-centered, was so tied with this idea that you need to isolate someone's problem and provide a solution. And suddenly now we don't, first of all, we don't have the consumer anymore, because everybody can produce value. Everybody has the potential to create amazing things. So content, work, capabilities, everything is growing in the hands of these small entities. So you don't have the consumer anymore. And secondly, you don't have the problem anymore. You don't have the solutions anymore, because suddenly anybody is understanding anything about the market. So, the question is, what happens when you don't understand anymore the problem and you don't trust anymore your solutions? The only thing you can do, you can nurture interactions, hoping that the ecosystem can figure out. So there's a completely, kind of radical switch between this idea of industrial age, where we knew the problems, we thought we knew the problems, we thought we knew the solutions, and then we created this mess, like this completely, messy situations that we live now. All this isolation in consumers then created this completely messed up world. And then now we understand that we probably didn't understand the problem very well, and so we want to nurture conversation, exploration. We basically trust the ecosystem that can self-organize, and therefore you suddenly switch between the idea to design for problems and solutions and consumers. Then you move into creating relationships for systems to self-organize.
And one of the strengths, I think, of the framework that you propose in the toolkit is the amount of flexibility that exists within the framework, to allow both different people to play different roles, as you say, to engage in different ways with different parts of the ecosystem. So I think there's just a lot of possibility that's offered by the framework. I'm wondering how much that flexibility sometimes leads to either misconceptions or kind of misuse of the framework. How much of that do you run into?
Well, in general, I think you cannot misuse a framework. So as long as you're doing work and not just PowerPoints, it's very good. You cannot go wrong. So especially because we work a lot with corporate customers and large organizations. The important thing is to really think, have conversations, make hypotheses, then test them and evolve your understanding. So when people ask me, is it the right way to use the canvas or not? These questions really do not make any sense, because the canvas themselves, are just pieces of paper where we have drafted some ideas. So, there is this principle of Oriental philosophy, I think, which is called the shuari. So basically, shuari means that you try something and you follow the master. So you can follow us, you can follow our user guide, you can go to the masterclass and so on. But then when you make it yours and you really do it naturally. So you start thinking in terms of ecosystems, you start thinking in terms of relationships and platforms, and then you start thinking, I would say, post-industrially, then you can create your own ways to, to become a designer for the age of complexity. It's not really about sticking with the toolkit. So it's just, the toolkit is just, it's like I would say, a training manual that you can use when you start learning a new martial art.
And one of the things that's incredible about the toolkit is that it's very much of an open source kind of document. It's free, it's open, it can be used by companies and kind of thinkers alike. Why was it important for you that the tool be free and be widely accessible like this?
Well, on one hand, because it was based on open source knowledge already. So most of the big ideas that are in the toolkit, they are from other people that are releasing them, either I would say intentionally in the commons, so licensing them into open source tools, like Osterwalder did with the business model canvas, like Simon Wardley is doing with the Wardley maps, or just releasing them in the public domain as blog posts. So so actually one motivation is we are remixing. We are not inventing anything. We are just remixing ideas. I'm taking ideas from John Hagel or Simon Wardley or Ben from Stratcherry. So basically we are Ben Thompson. So we are putting things together. No? So it's something that we need to do. And on the other hand, we choose to do that because by creating open source tools and by releasing all our knowledge in the commons, we are somehow pushed to somehow, I would say, climb the value chain. So we are also pushed to design ourselves as a platform. So it's always good to have this push towards creating new value, because otherwise you feel you tend to stuck with trying to put a price tag on whatever you do, and that's it, and you don't really evolve. Instead, if you really embrace this idea that within time or in general, whatever you do needs to go in the commons, then you need to figure out what is your business model. And I always say that it's easy to have a business model based on controlling and vetting. It's much harder to have a permissionless business model.
Now, is that how you operate your organization today?
Well, of course, we need to walk the talk, and therefore we are increasingly embracing this thinking. I think in general we are already a little bit platform organization because most of our value is based on learning and sharing. So we I would say embody a lot of one of the two engines that we think are the pillars of the platform strategy, so the learning engine. So we are really a learning engine for everybody in the world which is dealing with this topic. Now our toolkit is in the hands of probably something like 20,000 practitioners and hundreds of companies and so on. We still fail. I think we need to really improve, and this is my focus for the year. We really need to improve the way we collect and connect this practice, this community of practice. Because once we really become the catalyzers of interactions between them, then probably we are going to multiply our impact and the value we generate at scale for real. So when hundreds of companies start to interact and learn from each other, what does it mean to design for the age of complexity, then we are accomplishing our mission. Now we are still providing help, but there's a lot, too much that we need to do. And I think this is our main issue so far, and that's boundaryless. So the company that runs PDT is investing this year, not to platformize the potential.
It's exciting to hear both the success to date and the future plans. So you've worked with a lot of really fantastic companies across the world and across industries. If you kind of think back to the different opportunities you've had to participate in some of these, or maybe some of the instances in which the Platform Design Toolkit was used directly by the companies themselves, what are some examples of the impact that it's had that you can share with us?
Well, in general, I'm not a big fan of considering, for example, working with a company less impacting than working with an NGO, for example, or with an institution, because in the end, I think it's really we are really living the age of institutional failure. So probably we are empowering a new generation of institutions, self-organized, emergent. But if you ask me this question directly, I think I can probably talk about two interesting projects we had the chance to work on, and one was a project we did with an hospice in the UK. It was very interesting because in the end they used platform thinking to envision how to transition from I would say industrial healthcare models towards social care. So basically the idea was to mobilize a network of volunteers and people around the end of life terminal ill patients in just to provide them end of life services and support for caregivers. That was very interesting. And the most interesting part was not the project itself, but the idea, the possibility that we had to facilitate a mass, it was huge workshop with tens of patients, so tens of caregivers and professionals from the hospital. That was very interesting because all these people had completely no experience about design. And I think the fact that we are outsiders and that we are self-taught designers, it's giving us a head start in really understanding how to banalize design thinking and how to banalize platform thinking. So that was interesting. And another one was when I think I cannot avoid to mention this, we had the chance to work a little bit 2 times in 2 projects into, I would say, iterations with the United Nations, more specifically with the UNDP, the development programs. And especially when we had a chance to work with some people from the Asia Pacific hub. It was very interesting, with the management and so on. But it was even more interesting to work with people on the field. It was a project in India, and it was nice because in that case we used PDT to envision policies. So there was the idea to make ecosystem-centric, ecosystem-driven policies. So the idea that the focus of the policy should move outside of the policymaker and move inside into the ecosystem. And that was a very interesting experience for the policymakers that were involved and the UN agency that was facilitating this. It was like a eye opener. What does it mean to regulate? And we were talking about the job market in Maharashtra, if I'm not wrong, for disadvantaged categories. So it was really interesting to help them to put their focus back into the ecosystem and really try to understand who were the people that they were trying to design a policy for.
So one of the things that I'm really excited about is that you will be coming to New York City in a couple months in order to share to conduct a masterclass And I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about how that looks. What does a 2-day masterclass look like? What's the experience like for participants? And what can people expect to learn and to take away?
Well, our masterclasses are very much, I would say, proven experience and format. We provided this masterclass in the last 2 years in something like 15 European cities. It was always an amazing experience and fulfilling experience, especially for us as facilitators and trainers, to engage with such an amazing community of adopters. I particularly love to give this masterclass because for me it's always a way to accelerate our methodology and our thinking. In 2 days with so many interesting people, we always get to some crazy new ideas. When it comes to the format, I would say that it's a mix between a strategic acceleration and a learning experience, because we always ask participants when they register to work in preparation and to identify a design brief that they are very much excited about. It can be, for example, the company's project, a new strategy that they're developing, a new organizational transformation that they are envisioning for their company, a market that is exciting them. So it's always about doing hands-on work for 2 days, very much focused on learning the new methodology, learning the approach, but on a real case. Speaking about the dynamics, I would say it's really a hands-on experience. So it's normally based on a flow that is made of a little bit of introduction, then exercise and reflection on how we confronted with the project. So it's a cycle of 6 or 7 experiences like that, like when you go scuba diving. You go, you see the fishes, and then you think about what did you see in the sea. So it's really good, and it's also very interactive. Normally we have several 6 or 7, 8 themes, because at the end we always have team tickets. So we have teams coming up, teams of 2, 3, or 4 people. But we also normally encourage people that come alone to organize, aggregate in projects, so aggregate in teams, because we think that the team experience is definitely much better.
So what's the audience composed of? Are the participants in the masterclass more at the kind of senior executive level, or is it innovation teams? Do you need a design background?
As I said, we did these workshops with several kind of people. I would say 80 years old people with no background in design, or also with university design students. So you have both sides of the spectrum. It's really democratic, because the fact that this methodology wasn't designed by designers, I would say, helps to keep it very user-friendly and very easy to relate to it. In general, it's what you need is interest for the topic, and ideally some project where you want to test the approach. So this is normally enough for you to come. In our experience, it's very often you have people from business strategy context or design thinking context, especially, for example, people that are responsible to promote design in companies, for example. Mm-hmm. Then you have startups. A lot of startups coming to our masterclass have used this experience to accelerate their vision and then move into pivoting or testing new ideas or recreating their strategy. Then, of course, lots of innovation management, marketing people that are looking for new opportunities for the development of the company, because platform thinking is very powerful when it comes to creating new business. Because of course, when you have, if you approach an opportunity with platform ecosystem in mind, you have to do much less and you have to design a little bit more. So it's shifting the investment from creating tools and resources into envisioning, understanding what you need to design instead of putting things on the market with no real fit or traction with the ecosystem.
Excellent, thank you. That's all the time we have today, but I do want to share that I've personally attended a masterclass with Simone and loved the experience, was blown away with the output, and highly recommend it to anybody who's either interested in exploring the possibilities offered by platform thinking or actively looking at an opportunity and trying to implement something within your company or organization. Simone, do you want to share the URL to your website where all the documents can be found?
Yes, of course. Everything you can find it on www.platformdesigntoolkit.com, and there you can find one white paper that was published in 2016. It's a bit old, I would say, but it's really good to give you a frame. But also, of course, you can find our fully open source toolkit with all the canvases in every format you may like to play with them. And also an additional platform opportunity exploration guide that we released more or less 2 months ago that will help you understand really, what are the contexts where you can apply platform thinking. So you have quite a lot of resources. I also suggest you to have a look to stories.platformdesigntoolkit.com, our Medium publication, where you can find hundreds of articles explain, trying to articulate our understanding and vision into more complex explanations and reflections.
Excellent. And then, of course, look out for more information on the masterclass in New York City. Thank you so much, Simone, for this time spent together. I really appreciate you sharing all of your stories and the background of the Platform Design Toolkit.
Thanks for having me. It was amazing to be featured on this crazy, amazing podcast. And I really look forward to be in New York with you and the attendees.
See you soon.